Welcome back to another episode of the Hormone Hub podcast, where we talk all things perimenopause, menopause, and have the conversations no one else is having. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode. Hello, and welcome back to the Hormone Hub podcast. I'm your host, Kylie Pinwell. And before I introduce today's guest, I'm just going to set the scene a bit and give you a bit of context. So today's guest is a 30-year survivor of vulvar cancer. Okay, and she spent the last 30 years fighting for more awareness, more research into women's gynecological cancers. So there's 5 main types of gynecological cancers. We've got cervical cancer. We're all aware of that. We have pap smears. There's the vaccine that's available. And quite often it's quite a straightforward treatment. There is ovarian cancer, and ovarian cancer is unfortunately one of the biggest killers of gynecological cancers. And this is because it's generally detected quite late. Now, we had, for those long-time listeners, we did have an episode where we interviewed Alvina, who was in Canada, and she was currently at that stage undergoing treatment. A happy update, she has successfully finished her treatment and has been given the all clear, which is amazing. So she's doing really well. I'll keep you updated with how she's going. There's uterine cancers, vaginal cancers, and vulvar cancers. So there's also a very rare fallopian tube cancer and cancer of the placenta as well. But again, not so common, but I think it's still worth mentioning. So some of the symptoms of gynecological cancers, which I really wanted to mention because we tend to just push these things aside. And I have women asking all the time in our Facebook community, I've got this going on, I've got this going on, I've got this going on. And I always encourage you, if something is new or something is a bit odd, just get it checked, if anything, for peace of mind. But early detection is everything. So some of the symptoms that could be caused by gynecological cancers could be sort of an abnormal or persistent vaginal bleeding. For example, if you've been through menopause and you start bleeding, any bleeding that's not a normal part of your menstrual cycle, or if you start bleeding after you've had sex. If you are getting an unusual vaginal discharge, if you're feeling any pain or pressure or discomfort in your abdomen, if you've had unexplained weight loss, if you've got swelling in your abdomen that's sort of come on and that's new for you, any change in your bowel or your bladder habits, pain during sex, any itching or burning or soreness in your pelvic region, on your vulva, any lumps, any sores, any sort of wart-like growths. Now, obviously, as with everything health, there's a number of different conditions that could cause these symptoms. But if any of these symptoms are experienced, it's really important that you talk to a doctor. Now, I'm just about to introduce Kath. Before I do, Kath had vulvar cancer. So I wanted to just sort of explain the terminology here. So the vulva is the global term that describes all of the structures that make up our external genitals, okay? So the components of the vulva are the mons pubis, the labia majora and minora, your clitoris, the vestibular bulbs, the vulva vestibule, the Bartholin glands, the Skene's glands, the urethra, and the vaginal opening. So we're talking all of those things collectively. And one thing that Kath is on a mission to is getting us using the correct terminology, because if we're using the right terminology, we know what we're talking about. Okay. So before I go any further, I would love to introduce Kath Mazzella. She has been given an Order of Australia medal for her work in women's gynecological health and for bringing awareness to women's gynecological health. So welcome to the show, Kath.
Well, thank you, Kylie. I'm really honoured to be able to share my message with you and your audience.
Yeah, thank you. Now, Kath, your story in gynecological health sort of started about 30 years ago. So do you want to just sort of walk us through what your experience was and then how you ended up doing what you do today?
So what a journey it's been.
Yeah.
I had in 1988, I had an abnormal pap smear. And I was told to have my cervix lasered and pop off and get on with your business. And I used to think, Well, we had signs behind the toilet doors and it said, if you make sure you have your pap smears. And I used to think, but why don't men have pap smears? Why don't? Because we were not given the information. It was like walking in the dark, but we did as we were told.
Yes.
But then 18 months later, I found a lump next to my clitoris. And I went to 2 GPs and 2 gynecologists, and they said, oh, it's common, don't worry about it. But in the end, my mum said, it's not normal to have lumps anywhere in your body. And I thought, Mum, what would you know? Opposed to these 4 experts, they know exactly what they're doing. Because Mum had had breast cancer, so she was pretty much aware. My mother and my 2 sisters also had breast cancer, so they were pretty much on the ball with the knowledge and all that sort of stuff. So eventually I asked for it to be removed, and it turned out to be cancer. And I was phoned at home while I was by myself and told that it was actually cancer and that I needed to see a gynecologist oncologist. Well, I didn't even know such a person existed, a specialist for gynecological cancers.
Yeah.
And so I was pretty much in the dark. I was admitted to hospital, and the saddest day of my life was to remove my clitoris, vulva, lymph glands, and also 6 weeks radiation.
Wow.
Well, I really find it a challenge how to express what that feels like. People say, oh, how does it feel like? I don't know how to express the angst and the betrayal and the whatever else went with it. But this is why I do this 30 years later, because I cannot make sense of the whole thing. And until I can get that awareness out there, well, perhaps then I will understand why it happened to me.
Yeah. And was there any sort of preparation before you had the surgery about we go in there and we might have to take your clitoris, and this means, was there any sort of talking you through what that meant for you?
Well, there was. My husband and I were there, and we both remember the gynecologist drawing on a board how he was to cut he has to cut the clitoris out because the cancer got next to the clitoris. And you're sitting there and you think, oh, would I rather just die with this? Or I've got 3 children, they're teenagers, and I thought, I've got to live. Yeah. So I was prepared to do that. I went home, everybody else went on about their business, and I started to question, why did this happen to me? And why is there so much stigma? Why is it so embarrassing? And even I didn't know what a vulva was at that stage either. Yeah. But I was given a brochure, and there was on the brochure, the cancer brochure, there was the ovaries, cervix, uterus, vagina. The vulva was cut off. Yeah. I thought, but why is the vulva cut out of me, and why is it cut off a cancer brochure? Yeah. And so began my search. I found another woman who belonged to a powerful women's organisation, and I wanted to talk about it. They said, well, their friend had just died of vulval cancer, and they'd appreciate that I don't talk about it. Oh. Hello? Yeah, I'm alive. Yeah. So, and then I coincidentally found another woman that had the same operation as me 8 months previous. Yeah. But we both had asked if we could speak with somebody who had the same operation, but they said, oh, ethically, you can't do that. But what we learned is that if she wanted it and I wanted it, we should have been bonded together, which we were by the forces of the world, that we accidentally found each other. But I think it was a bit, somebody mentioned that it would be too depressing to connect women up with women because it's so catastrophic that if we got together, we would get depressed. But see, this was a male's opinion.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's how it was in the day. And I think we need to understand the history around, the gynecologists are taught to protect us. We don't need protecting. We need the knowledge. We need the information. We need to stop this shame and embarrassment. So from that, I thought there must be others out there. So I placed an advertisement in the Woman's Day in the Can We Help You line. And all these ladies hand wrote me all these ladies' letters and the sadness and how the husbands were leaving them and how they were betrayed. And I thought, no, this is crazy. But I thought there was a conspiracy. Yeah. I thought, must be a conspiracy because what am I getting into here? That, the powers that be say you can't do that. And so I travelled around Australia to meet up with those ladies, and it was very, very sad to see that. I'm not laughing at it. I laugh because of the trauma, of the ridiculousness that women are out there, even 30 years later, some even dying, and it's like, who cares? Who cares? And it really saddens me. But I live with the hope. I'm trying to find that piece of gold, that who is it that's really going to help me take this to the powers that be and have things change, and for women's mindsets to change as well. And so began my journey. I set up a not-for-profit, and, but again, nobody was interested in a not-for-profit for gynecology because it's just, we don't go there. Yeah. So nothing was happening. So I rang Senator Amanda Vanstone back in the day. I rang their office and I said, look, got all these ladies' letters, all this stuff's going on behind the women's health doors, and it's like, you can't talk about this. So they said to have a national day. I said, but how do you do that? Yeah. And they said, well, you just declare it. And I thought, well, if it's that easy, I've declared an International Gynaecological Awareness Day. And those that object, well, that's just bad luck, because I'm going ahead without it, whether you like it or not.
Fantastic.
So we set up this Gynae Awareness Day, and we ended up getting a little office opposite our women's hospital. And so we were able to convince the King Edward Memorial Hospital to celebrate the Gynae Awareness Day, which they've celebrated for 8 years now. So it's just a stepping stone. But lots of people are territorial. It's like, oh, yes, but we don't do that. We don't. I'm just trying to bring everybody together. Wow. I remember the New South Wales Cancer Council. I spoke with one of the ladies who came to Perth, and I said, there's no vulvas. So I've got proof that the New South Wales Cancer Council were the first organisation to put a vulva diagram in their brochures, and now all the other organisations have, except one. And it's a research group for gynecological cancers, and there is no vulva. I'll say that again. There is no vulva. So and I'm told they don't. Pardon?
A women's health research group, a gynecological research group that doesn't have a picture of a vulva in their diagrams.
No. I have approached them before, and I said, can you tell me why you don't put a vulva in there? And they said because they don't get funding for the vulva. But I've said, you've got a vagina there, you don't get funding for the vagina. Yeah. But you see, for me to speak out about this, I feel like I'm stirring the pot.
So I was going to ask you, though, how common is vulval cancer?
That's the thing. It's not very common. It's only about 430 women in Australia, and not all those women die. But let me tell you about precancer. Such a thing.
I was going to ask, what are some of the early signs and symptoms of vulval cancer?
Okay. Well, first of all, mine was a lump.
What will be looking for?
Yeah. Mine was a lump, and I know most women I know who have died of vulval cancer, and yet I don't want to frighten women because, lots of women have got sclerosis, but it is a risk factor, and you need to take on the responsibility. You need to ask your doctor to check your vulva. You need to learn the health risks around that.
For our audience listening who might not even know what lichen sclerosis is, what should they be looking for, or what should they be concerned about? Because I think, you're right. We don't tend to, pay attention. And I know, a lot of my audience, they're busy, they sort of push through, and we tend to just not pay attention the way we should do to those little signs and symptoms that our body's giving us. So what should we be looking for?
So lichen sclerosis is an irritation of the vulva, and it doesn't take much for you to realise that something's not right. And I know that some people have written to me and they said, I've put up with this irritation for years and years, probably because they're being treated for thrush. But we cannot point the finger at the doctors there, because if there is no funding to teach doctors that an irritation could well be lichen sclerosis, well then, it's up to us as a society to understand and get rid of these stigmas and talk about it. But I just want to read you this bit about, so you can understand. It says, thanks for your comments. We appreciate it and recognise the illustration is missing the vulva. We have been trying to find something that is clear and informative, but we're also aware that some illustrations may not be appropriate for our culturally and linguistic diverse audiences. We've been consulting with our members, our team, and created an effective diagram design that is also acceptable to those in the community. A designer is booked in to work with us on this soon, and I can write back to you once the diagram is published on our site. I was told that 12 months ago.
Yeah, right.
In the meantime, I know women that have died, and it just sends a shiver up my spine to think, how long does it take to draw a vulva?
Yeah.
How long does it take,
Oh,
So
I'm pleased to report in primary school when they do sex education, it is an anatomically correct drawing.
Yeah.
Which is, and that's year 6 sex ed. In our school, I can happily say that all the girls and the boys were together.
All right.
They did separate them, but then they swapped. So they all got the same information, but just not together. So when they were talking pads and periods and tampons and things like that, and they were all handing them around, they did the girls separately, and then they sort of were talking to the boys, and then they swapped, but they all got the same information. Hello, I see you there, juggling work, family, life, all while navigating perimenopause and menopause. But guess what? Maybe it's time to break up with the hustle and grind. Going on a retreat is more than just about a vacation. It's an investment in your well-being and a step towards a happier, healthier you. So take a moment, consider the benefits of a retreat and give yourself the gift of rejuvenation and self-care. Self-care is all about giving the best of you, not what's left of you. I want you to save $500 now, jump in for the Reignite You Retreat. We're running in Bali in April 2024 and October 2024. And yes, we sure do have payment plans available. See you there.
I found the word pudendum in the dictionary in my research, and the Latin version of that word says female genitalia, one who should and ought to be ashamed, the shameful part of a woman. So we all call it a vagina. That's it.
I think that's the thing. It's when we start using the correct terminology, it's going to break down the barriers.
Absolutely.
Less taboo. And we were talking before we hit record that there is a big sort of stigma around women's gynecological health. We're really not talking about the way we should do. And I would like to think it's changing with the generations coming through.
Yeah, it is.
Which is a great thing. But I think 420 odd women getting diagnosed each year, this is something that we should be aware of and paying more attention to.
But I need to say that this is not just about the vulva. That was only my discovery. But I discovered after my cancer that my daughter had polycystic ovaries and endometriosis. And when she was suffering with period pain, I used to think it's just a period because I didn't have the understanding. And we need to have the understanding. And that's why I thought with the International Gynae Awareness Day, we can bring all of these issues out, not just one, Yeah,
exactly. And that's the thing. And I have conversations with women all the time who have horrendous periods and it becomes their normal.
Yeah.
So they're used to it. So they're not having the conversation. They're not putting their hand up to go, hang on, this isn't right. They might have been initially and they get bounced around, they get put on the pill and then, that's just, the way it is. You just have to put up with it. So
and they have to go to work and pretend it's not happening.
Yeah.
But again, it is changing, which is very exciting for me to sit back after 30 years, the sort of thing. Well, yeah, there is some changes being made, but how can we charge forward? So I've come up with this Undies for Better Understanding campaign, and they're cardboard cutout knickers, and we decorate them with leftover bling and material and things. And then we've got a song that we sing after, and it's called the Dynamite song. So it's ladies to the left, ladies to the right, don't forget your dynamite. We care a lot, so spread the cheer to look after what's down here. Shake it, shake it, shake it. So we need to have some fun, and I do with some of my presentations, I call them Viva la Vulva, and I ask the women to stand up and acknowledge they have a vulva and then say, Viva la Vulva, let's celebrate our magnificent body. So I'm not being rude with it. I'm just trying to break down the barriers. But also and, just put some fun in it. I have devised a paper talk, which is very simple. The simple language is just one word, one sentence explaining what it is, and there it's got all the glory of the ovary, cervix, uterus, and including the vulva. I've also got another thing that I would love doctors to have in their office, because my GP has to draw a vulva when she's explaining whatever. She has to draw it because she's got a diagram of the ovary, cervix, uterus, vagina, no vulva. Yes. So I was looking to see if I could find an organisation to help a vulva examination, a self-examination, because if we're taught how to check our breasts, and, why not how to teach our vulva and what to keep an eye out for. Anyhow, I'll hand it over to you, Kylie, because I'm talking too much.
Oh, no, you're right. I was going to say, if you're happy to share a copy of that, I'll pop it in our show notes, and then women can then access that on our website.
Okay.
And how to do that vulval check. So, Kath, thank you for sharing that. And I think it's amazing the work that you're doing. So when is International Gynae Day?
It's on the 10th of September.
10th of September. Beautiful. All right. We will be promoting that happily. Yeah. And then what would you say to sort of someone who kind of suspects that maybe she should be investigating further, that she's noticed that her vulva is feeling dry, she's noticed she's feeling uncomfortable in jeans, she thinks maybe she's just had ongoing thrush? Where would you suggest, or how would you suggest she starts that conversation with her GP?
Well, first of all, listen to what I've just said, and I'm not afraid, and I want you not to be afraid, and go to a women's health centre and you ask to say, please, could you check my vulva because I have an irritation there. But it's about building the confidence within and being brave enough to use the word vulva. But by using the word vulva, it empowers you. It's amazing the changes that will come over when you can just acknowledge that you have a vulva. So I just ask you to make sure you follow it up and just don't put up with it and think, oh, it's just thrush, if some doctors might think that.
There's a lot of women out there who are just treated ongoing for thrush, and it could be sclerosis, it could be bacterial vaginosis, it could be something a bit more sinister like vulval cancer. So I think we're our own best advocates for our own health. So if we're not sure about something, we need to push for answers. If we're not happy with the answers, we need to continue to ask the questions until we get something resolved as well. Yeah, and that's the thing. And I think, why do we have to tiptoe and be culturally sensitive? Because women from all cultures have a vagina and a vulva and a clitoris. And it shouldn't be part of it. It's sort of like, okay, we're talking to a group of women who have these body parts, and that's just the way it is. So why are we hushing it up?
I had our health minister speak about my work in Parliament House, and he said, I've never said it before, and I'll probably never say it again, but I've seen Kath Mazzella's panties. But he was referring to my cardboard cutout panties. So if he can make light of it, let's us as women try to make some light of it as well.
Absolutely, and normalise it by talking.
I mean, it's such a special part of our body. Yeah. And what has the pudendum done is put shame on us. And people might say, oh, I don't have any shame about it. But you start talking about it and you soon realise that there is still a lot of stigma out there that needs to be broken.
Yeah. All right. Well, Kath, I can see you are on a mission and doing an amazing job to bring awareness to women's gynaecological health. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
But I can't do this on my own. I need others to get behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. You've given me some links to some of your work, so we will put those in the show notes. So definitely this is a conversation we will continue.
Okay.
Well, thanks so much, Kath, and thanks everyone for listening.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thank you for taking the time to listen today. You can head on over to the show notes at kyliepinwill.com/podcast, where you'll find all the links. Now, before we go, it would mean the world to me if you'd head on over to your favourite podcast channel, subscribe and leave a review. Don't forget to share it with your friends. Then stay tuned for next week's episode, and we can't wait to see you then.